like to welcome you to the 2020 Farm Forum here in Fosston, put on by KKCQ and a bunch of great ag sponsors. One of them being Red River Farm Network, and I'm going to have sort of Kara take over the mic here in a second. I'm going to be up here fiddling with equipment here to try to get as best sound as we can. Since we're in a auditorium, we do not have the best sound. We're going to get a little echoey. So we're going to try to tweak it as good as we can so you guys can hear. So just help us out on that, and we'll get going here with Kara.
Thanks, guys. How are you this morning? Good. I hear a few comments coming back. If you still feel like you need to wake up a little bit, I think there's still some coffee and donuts over there. All right, guys. Again, good morning. Welcome to the Farm Forum. My name is Kara Hart. I am a farm reporter with the Red River Farm Radio Network. We're a radio network based in Grand Forks, North Dakota, and we cover North Dakota, South Dakota also. And the Fosston station is one of our radio affiliates. Thanks to Don Brickman up here, Whitney Pittman in the back, and the staff and crew that have invited us to be part of this today. Really excited to hear from you lawmakers and also hear from the House Agriculture Committee Chair Colin Peterson. So this morning we're going to be discussing some of the challenges and opportunities ahead for Minnesota farmers. Now as part of that discussion, KKCQ has invited the following lawmakers. So if you're here, and I think all of you are, please wave your hands. So Senator Mark Johnson. Senator Johnson is the Vice Chair for the Agriculture, Rural Development, and House Finance Committee. Johnson calls East Grand Forks, Minnesota. Still, right? Yeah. Deb Keel. So Representative Deb Keel serves on the Agriculture and Food, Finance, and Policy Division Committee and more. Keel is from the Grassland area. Steve Green. Representative Steve Green serves on the Environment and Natural Resources Finance Division, Environment and Natural Resources Policy Committee. I'm sure you all know he's from around here, that Fosston area. And then Matt Grossel. Representative Grossel serves on the Judiciary, Finance and Civil Law Division, Public Safety and Criminal Justice Reform, Finance and Policy Division, and others. Grossel, you're still from that clear book. Did I get that right? Do you still sit on those committees? Okay, temporarily reassigned. You guys, those committees are really long. Those are long-named committees.
I still got the long name, yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, we look forward to hearing updates from all of you. Thank you for joining us, and I'm sure many of you know House Agriculture Committee Chair Colin Peterson will be joining a little bit later this morning, so stay tuned. Now, for you four lawmakers, before we get started, I'm going to give some comments, but is there a preference that you want to give your updates? Does anyone want to go first? Okay.
I'm missing a marriage conference speaker, so that shows how fit I am.
All right, Senator Johnson going first. Anyone have a preference to go next?
Just pick a name, it doesn't matter.
Okay. I always like to ask because sometimes, like the senator said, you're missing something else to be here. We want to certainly be mindful of your time this morning. So as we get started, I thought I would just give a quick update. And I say quick with a little bit of laughter behind that because as many of you know, when you're involved in agriculture, there's always a lot going on, and there have been no exceptions. With the rough 2019 that we've had going into this year, 2020. So you all know it's been tough in agriculture. Last fall, the delayed planting season, rather last spring, the delayed planting season, and the cold, wet harvest hit you all pretty hard. So wheat quality suffered. Sugar beets and potatoes were left in the ground, and corn and sunflowers in areas still remain. Farmers, you all still trying to get the crops harvested if you can. Many farmers are really glad to leave 2019 in the rearview mirror, and the challenge will now be wrapping up harvest and potentially wet spring and getting something into the ground, right? Or calving if you haven't quite started calving season yet. In the livestock sector, the Minnesota Department of Agriculture says 315 of the state's licensed dairy farms exited the industry in 2019. This is the second year in a row Minnesota has lost more than 300 dairies. The Department of Ag says these large numbers are due to a drop in milk prices. Farmers also having a tough time financially. Negative profit margins are being noted. Equity or net worth has diminished for so many. USDA forecasting 2020 net farm income to increase 3.3% in the year ahead. USDA also said U.S. net cash income, which doesn't include adjustments for depreciation or inventory, would decline 9%. Cash receipts from livestock and crop sales are projected to increase, but farm real estate debt is also projected to reach a record high in 2020. Crop insurance guarantees for loans, whether corn, soybeans, and wheat, will be lower in 2020, according to American Farm Bureau Federation Chief Economist John Newton. Illinois corn came in at $3.88 a bushel, down 12 cents from last year. Soybeans came in at $9.17. That's down significantly from last year. Lower crop insurance guarantees, of course, lower protection for farmers and ranchers for you all this year. So we've talked about some pretty grim things so far this morning, but there are some options available to help you guys secure some financing. On Thursday night, Minnesota House lawmakers approved funding for the Rural Finance Authority. This year's bill asked for $50 million to help farmers. That's typically not that much, considering, well, $50 million is more than they've asked for in the past, I should say. The RFA provides state guarantees for local lender ag loans, and the Senate could consider the legislation as soon as Monday of the year. USDA is offering funds through disaster aid and emergency loans in eligible counties, including Polk, Marshall, Beltrami, Monoman, and others. The USDA recently extended $285 million in disaster aid to sugar co-ops. Local ag groups are working with the USDA to address quality loss provisions. Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue told lawmakers earlier this week that quality loss provision is a complex issue and revisions are being worked on. It will be rules-based, likely announced in April or May. Market Facilitation Program 2.0 helped farmers' balance sheets last year. But Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue said earlier this week there won't be a 2020 MFP because it's not a price support program. He told the Red River Farm Network got to talk to him in a one-on-one interview, and he said if that trade doesn't materialize, however, they will be ready to get one out. If you were here last year at Farm Forum, securing trade deals were top of mind. Now, 1 year later, as you all know, the U.S. has secured agreements with Japan, Canada, Mexico, and also a Phase 1 trade deal with China. Many farmers expressing optimism on these trade deals with the promise of growing markets. The U.S. and Japan bilateral trade agreement went into effect on January 1st. Tariffs were lifted on more than $7 billion worth of U.S. agricultural products. Japanese consumers have greater access to American beef, pork, and more. It also provides a country-specific quota for U.S. wheat. The U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement was signed by President Trump in late January, but we're still waiting on Canada to ratify the USMCA. Reports say the deal appears to be on track for approval in Canada, but so far it's been pretty slow moving. Once it's completely ratified, President Trump says Canada will provide greater access for American dairy. Poultry exports are expected to increase too. The agreement also puts U.S. wheat back on a level playing field, allowing tariff-free access for imported U.S. wheat to flour millers in Mexico, and it gives progress for more open commerce for U.S. wheat farmers in our area, clarifying grading treatments. Now finally, the U.S. and China signed a Phase 1 trade deal on January 15th. In that trade deal, China committed to at least $80 billion worth of food, ag, and seafood product purchases in the next 2 years. Now, no specifics were given on how much of which product would be purchased. The agreement took effect on February 14th. The implementation of this Phase 1 trade deal with China, as you all know, has been a little complicated due to a little something called the coronavirus. Have you all heard of the coronavirus? Yeah, I know, right? Dairy Farmers of America actually postponed its annual meeting in Kansas City due to an abundance of cautions regarding the coronavirus. Due to travel restrictions, it is impossible to have face-to-face meetings with the Chinese, and also the coronavirus could be an issue for the global economy. So in response to the coronavirus fears, the Federal Reserve cut interest rates this week. This was their first emergency move since the financial crisis to offset economic risks for the virus. The stock markets are also being impacted by the coronavirus expansion and fears. This in turn continues to have some impact on the livestock and grain markets. China is allowing importers some tariff relief on buying soybeans, though there is still an additional cost to buy U.S. products. Grain traders are watching closely for China purchases. This week and last, China bought some sorghum. On Friday, Japan purchased 100,000 metric tons of U.S. corn and another 211,336 metric tons of corn is going to unknown destinations. Could that be China? We don't know. Market analysts hoping to see some U.S. soybean sales in the next few weeks. Traders say they believe China purchases whenever the USDA sends that official confirmation. So until they actually see the numbers from the USDA, they're not going to believe that China's coming in to purchase. There are still a few unknowns on this phase 1 trade deal with China. The U.S. is also looking into trade agreements with the European Union and India. I told you guys this was going to be a long update. It's also an election year. President Trump is seeking re-election, and we're getting closer to hear who will represent the Democratic Party. And as many of you know, House Agriculture Committee Chair Colin Peterson announced his run for re-election yesterday. In St. Paul, Minnesota lawmakers are in session through May. It is a bonding year, as I'm sure we'll hear. Also being discussed is a projected $1.5 billion surplus. Lawmakers already hearing ways to use those extra funds, if they are available, for agriculture. Some of those things could include investing in grain bin safety, funding rural mental health advocates, and animal health. Also, lawmakers hearing more about Section 179 conformity. We'll know a little bit more about the breakdown of the numbers by the end of the month. Policy also being considered, including an effort to increase the state's ethanol standard from 10% to 15%. So as I wrap this up, we've talked really about a lot of heavy things. I just wanted to let you all know it's okay to ask for help when we're going through tough times like this. You guys aren't alone going through the crumminess of 2019 and trying to make it through and figure out 2020. So the Red River Farm Network has a new radio and podcast series called Transformation. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but the series is designed to increase awareness on farm stress. And one of the episodes highlights Red River Farm Network's Randy Clement. Randy used to be a farmer, if many of you don't know, and it got really hard for him to farm. So he left agriculture, and so now he's on farm radio. And he shares that story in the podcast, and it's a pretty powerful story. It also offers resources if you need it. So you can find that podcast at rrfn.com, or if you listen to Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Google Play. Also, if you have a story you'd like to share with us, you feel like you've gone through something really tough that you think you can help others, please let us know if we can do anything to help or if you'd like to share. These are just a few of the topics and headlines that we're following on the Red River Farm Network. Thank you all for listening. I've had many of you come up to me and say that you listen every day, and we are very grateful for your listens. If we could do anything for you or cover different things, or if you see anything that we need to make sure is on our radar, don't ever hesitate to let us know. It's also the time of year we travel quite a bit, bringing updates from the International Sugar Beet Institute, and next week, a Northern Commodity Transportation Conference in Minneapolis. You can also catch us on Facebook and Twitter at RRFN. So we're looking forward to today's discussions, but before we get into these lawmakers, do any of you have any questions on ag news? Anything that I can answer for you? We couldn't have covered all that ground that way. All right, well, I'm going to be helping out all day, so if you do have a question but you don't feel comfortable raising your hand, just come find me, and I'm more than happy to help out. And side note, during this whole process, if you have a question for one of our lawmakers as we get ready to hear sure to raise your hand. We're going to have a microphone traveling throughout the room. I'll be sure to get you the microphone so you can ask questions. This microphone does not have a mute button, so be careful what you say when you have the microphone close. Once again, thanks for joining KKCQ 1480 AM Fosston for the annual Farm Forum. Be sure to listen to the Red River Farm Network every weekday for market updates and farm news. Thank you all so much. All right, we ready to hear from the Senator? Senator Johnson? Yeah.
Does this have a sensor or a mute button on it? In case I say something
As we spill things.
silly?
I don't know.
No, I'm just kidding.
Whitney?
That's just for show? Oh, okay. This is for show. This is the show
okay.
mic. There we go.
So we
I've
just
never
have
had a show
one. We just
mic.
have one mic today, guys. So we'll have to share.
All right. Well, I appreciate the work that she does. You see her and listen to her every day. She does a wonderful job of delineating the issues that are going on in the ag community throughout the year. So thank you so much for everything that you do for us. I appreciate that. Well, thank you for coming out. This is a wonderful morning to be outside and drive around. It's a little bit dreary in here. This is kind of how I feel like, you're out in the yard, kind of entry. This might be the feel that you get, but this is good to be here with you guys. Thank you so much. So we have had a really interesting year. It's been just a fascinating year down in St. Paul from just the plethora of issues. I think a lot of that is because it's election year. So people are trying to really make sure that they're highlighting the issues that are going on in the state of Minnesota. One of the things I want to make sure we cover today is that we don't have the ability to move markets. We're not like President Trump or Congressman Peterson. We have policy that really moves markets, like you might see with the Phase 1 trade deal or the USMCA. But what we can do at the state level is help with things like property taxes, with making sure that like the aid to school credit, that's a project that we're working on, or the 179 issues that are going on. Those are things that we can do, the state of Minnesota, to make sure that we are simplifying life, making sure that we are doing the things that we're not hindrance to the markets that you see over time. So there are three things I just want to talk about briefly. I'll let Mr. Green, Representative Green, talk about bonding, because I know that's a topic he loves to talk about. So we'll let him do that. But three things. So first of all, Kara talked about mental health. That's something that we've been hearing over and over. Since I was first elected in 2016, mental health is something that we've talked about. Now that's just 4 years that we've been talking about that. But you can see where it's gone from taboo to something that's more mainstream at that time. There's been several incidents, one particularly up here in our neck of the woods, that's really transformed the discussion around mental health. And I know it's something that we struggle with, especially after last year. So what we did prior to this year was put some more funding in there for another mental health advocate. We only had one farm mental health advocate across the state. Ted did all the work across the state. Many of you may have known him. But we gave him a little support with another mental health advocate, and we're looking at ways that we can approach that, really reduce the taboo of mental health issues, and get people that need the help that they need. That's not just for farming, that's also for school. If you go talk to a school administrator, what's the first thing that they talk about? It's mental health. Of all the things that you can talk about, it's mental health. So this is something that we got to be on, talking to your neighbors, talking to your friends, figuring those things out is pretty important. The second thing I want to talk about is the House passed the RFA. Now this is a program that we're trying to put $50 million into for young beginning farmers and to help those farms that are struggling. So these are low interest loans that come alongside the local banks. So this is just to help restructure the financial or the balance sheet of a farm and make sure that you can go into next season strong. This is a critically needed program. We've done $35 million, $30 million, and this is $50 million ask, but the program always gets used. And it's been very effective, and it's a revolving fund, so it's not $50 million that's just going out. It's coming back into the state, so it really has negligible cost to the state itself. So very important program for that. And then finally, I mean, there's a plethora of things we can talk about, but the 179 is going to be talked about several times. So we're still trying to get conformity. The Senate position on that is one full conformity. That's going to be a $220 million cost to the state. But right now, we've got farmers in this area that are having to go out and take out loans to pay their state tax because they traded in their equipment at the wrong time, got some of the equipment. It's a crazy situation that we've come up against, and for some reason, it's been blocked being able to fully conform. So this year, both us and the House and the governor's voicing support for that too, to try to get the full conformity. So we're going to be working on that. The last thing I want to touch on is I see we have a couple of folks from the Sugar Beet Board back there. One of the problems that we're really having last year, and my phone was ringing out the book about this, was that we were having state patrol parked a mile or two away from the sugar beet factory. And they were pulling over trucks. We've got a blizzard coming. The conditions out in the field are horrible, and yet they're still taking 45 minutes to go over your truck. And you talk to them and say, we're not going over the sugar beet trucks. But they're set up a mile away from the sugar beet plant, pulling over every fifth truck that's coming down the main road to the sugar beet plant. So they're targeting sugar beet plants. So we've got a number of bills out there that are addressing that situation. The search warrant requirement, you have to have reasonable suspicion. Right now, you don't have to have reasonable suspicion to pull over a commercial vehicle. If Brady's driving down the road and his taillight's out, that's what it takes for an officer to pull over Brady. But if you're driving down the road in a perfectly good truck, you don't need reasonable suspicion to pull that over right now. So we're trying to get some bills, a law in place that really addresses this to make it fair and even for our agricultural drivers, commodity drivers, and just folks out in the commercial realm. So, anyways, those are the things that are working right now. In the legislature, there's a whole list of them. But maybe I'll cut it short there. And if there's any questions, take them. If not, we've got a lineup of great speakers here.
On your trucks deal, I agree with what you're saying, it's a problem, but
you have this with wood trucks, and they don't even need to be stopped. If you pull into Northwoods out there, you're over 90,000 pounds, they can walk in there, pick up your ticket, and send you a fine.
Yeah.
But, those people, you're gonna have to work with everybody, not just farmers. Because those guys that got to go every day on the road out there, they don't appreciate farmers getting by with stuff that they can't get by with either. So.
Absolutely.
Mark, they can do that same thing at the plant site.
I know you mentioned that, not a lot you can do about markets, but E15 in Minnesota could be a big deal. That can switch markets, be a leader in renewable energy across the country, getting Minnesota to be the first one to switch over to E15 mandate would be a big deal in Minnesota, be a big deal for our farmers. Where do you, as this moves forward, where do you see yourself voting on something like that?
Yeah, so we just had a committee hearing on E15. Some of the issues that really came up there were, number one, is there going to be room in a lot of our small town islands to be doing this? So we have a E10, it sounds like, and some of the islands, E15, E85. So we're looking at what's the equipment that's needed. We get blender pumps on that. So I see it shaking.
I think, well, because I think they're talking 88 octane would be the new standard level, so you're going to have 87.
Well, the discussion, I'm just talking about the discussion. So this was the discussion. We have that, and this was brought up by Senator Thomasoni, Democrat from the range. She's very concerned about this as well. Do we have the infrastructure? Are the things going to be able to take apparently there's some different chemical, once you get to a higher level of some certain chemical in there, they're worried about seams on the tanks. So there's things that we need to get addressed before we start looking at that and passing that sort of thing. And it's just the practical matters. So we can dictate and say, yeah, E15 and then follow up with some issues, but let's get into the workings of this and see how we can practically work out. So.
I appreciate everything about the RFA program. It's been fantastic. One question I have about it is it always becomes a little bit of a struggle when we're in these challenging situations that are collateral based. We have to share a lien position. Is there any way to modify that, get access to both sets of funds for the creditor and for the borrower by not necessarily sharing the lien, but maybe having RFA in a second? Is there any thought of that? And the second thing, where are we at with 179? Because that's becoming a theme in the tail.
So I'll start with the 179 issue first, because that's one that's been talked about more, I would say, on how that's going to function. There's significant problems with the 179 not conforming right now. And even our tax chair in the Senate, who I think was fairly lukewarm to the conformity idea originally, has really seen what this is doing to our small businesses and farmers. And he is very passionate about it now. He wants to do some retroactivity, because if you got stuck in that situation, just going forward, you know, if you had to take a loan or you had to do something, you're still paying them. So we want to do a little bit of retroactivity on that, and I think there's a lot of momentum to get this thing done this year. We just have to get something done in that Senate. That's the way that our caucus feels in the Senate, and I know the House Republican caucus feels the same way. The Democrat caucus is looking at a couple of different proposals of 50% conformity, 75% conformity. I know we're a couple of bills that Representative Marquardt was talking about as well. So we'll see where that ends up at the end, at the very end of the session, but we're really working on that one. So, and then with the RFA program, as far as the lead position on that one, you know, we've had those conversations before. I feel like the program itself, those folks aren't, you know, they need some assurances as well. I see you're working with Dave Country. Is that right? Yeah.
There's a lot of creditors that are running the same issue as I do.
Right. And that's a complication within the program, but it's still something that we need to make sure we have the collateralization behind it as well to secure those loans, to make sure that because right now I think we're at a 2% or 1.5% loss rate on that, which is really fantastic. So the collateralization, we haven't had so much problem with that. We don't have a problem with losses or anything. We can look at it and do that, but if you up the rate or you take a second on that, you know, are we going to be comfortable with a lot of the collateral that's not the same? There's some concern about that. Sure. So we'll look at it, but I don't know if there's going to be much of it there. Okay. All right. Well, my wife is at a marriage conference at Hope Church right now by herself. I don't know what that means, but I'm in trouble, I think. So I'm going to go. I will leave these guys that are very capable hands. Thank you so much for this morning. I really appreciate it. And good luck this spring. You know, we got some significant issues going forward, but my prayers are with you. If you ever have any questions, please look me up online. Just Google Senator Mark Johnson. My cell phone number is right there. Give me a call. I'll be more than happy to talk with you if you have other questions. So have a great one.
Thank you so much for taking time for the update. Guys, good questions, really good questions. So many of you have asked why you need a microphone to ask your questions, and I neglected to tell you at the very beginning of this that we are also live streaming this event. So you could always go back and listen later as well. You can find that at liveevent.com. Did I get that right?
yourliveevent.com. Yes.
Go back and listen to all of this as well. A friendly reminder, if you haven't entered your name into the drawing for your prizes, be sure to do so. I believe that's in the back. And
hesitate to have another cup of coffee or grab some donuts as well. So, all right, we're ready for our next speaker. So whoever is ready to come next. Deb Keel.
Thank you. Well, good morning. Thanks a lot for just coming, taking time out of your weekend to hear what's going on in St. Paul. I really appreciate that. As you probably are aware, I'm a farmer south of Crookston. I left 40%, or my husband and son actually left 40% of our sugar beets in the ground. And I know when we talk about sugar beets, it isn't the only crop. Potatoes are also a crop that got left, and that is affecting Fosston and the factory here, and how important that is to this area. Whether people are working there or getting product out is so very important, and it is going to be really challenging. I talked to a gentleman who was looking to buy some beet pulp to feed his cattle and was very concerned about whether or not there would be enough food for cattle. And so I'm going to put this out there because I talked to Commissioner Peterson. Make sure that if you're having some challenges, either I didn't bring any of those. They're updating the leaflet, but there are some farm management people out there that will help connect if you need cattle feed or hogs or whatever it is. But make sure that you connect with them. It's going to be tight. It is, that just is the way it is because of the harvest we had. And of course, leaving food in the, wheat, straw, all of that, but hay in the ground, whatever didn't get brought up. I want to know how many of you still have corn standing? Okay. I drive back and forth and am seeing it come off. Someone is in my office this last week and told me that in the south areas of in Minnesota, and I actually saw somebody with a land leveler out in the field trying to get the combines through the field because the ground didn't freeze very well in the south half of Minnesota. And so they're having a heck of a time trying to get the corn off, just get in the field in general. And so I think there's going to be some challenges there, but I wish you the best because I know that it's important to get it off, and it'll be interesting to see how we're going to get all of this worked in the spring, and then, which looks like it's melting kind of nicely. Hopefully it stays that way and we don't have to deal with flooding. And to that end, Minnesota has a disaster account. So if we need some help there with flooding and whatever happens there, that's important to know that those things are being planned. We're looking at that because we realize that could be the problem. I hope you all get your corn off. My brother is a hog farmer also, so they took theirs off earlier and dried it, and we talked about the cost, and then of course they're grinding it for feed, and I know all of those things are challenging, so I hear from family about that. So we don't raise any animals in my farm, so I don't even have a dog anymore. Our wonderful dog passed away and we haven't replaced her. So anyway, importantly, I serve on Ag Committee, and one thing I want to talk about is accidents. Of course, we've heard some horrible loss of life. We've been having some conversations. I'm a little concerned about, I've talked to the Department of Labor and Industry. The commissioner there, I actually asked her to come into my office. The suggestion has been that we do have OSHA, which they can come in and give you advice about what you should be doing on your farms that creates safety, whether it's a harness when you're working in grain bins or your implements and making sure that the PTOs are covered, or all of those things, that we're not running machinery when we're fixing it, and I know how awful that can be, but I'm a little concerned about having voluntary OSHA come in and check I see heads shaking, and actually I told her I'm very concerned about that. I said, because I know these guys are smart, and their spouses are too, and we know the risk. We need to make sure that our employees understand the risk, and that they make sure that they are being cautious and safe. You know, the incident with the silage was a horrible, tragic accident. Unfortunately, that type of stuff does happen once in a while. I have a brother that was walking in the hog barn a long time ago, and he was going to step in, and there's a cat in the doorway that, well, that's kind of odd. And then kind of looked into the barn and saw quite a few of the bred sows acting odd or dead. And then all of a sudden, thank goodness, he was about 19 years old, went, ooh, I shouldn't walk in, methane gas poisoning. So he opened up the barn doors and got the air in. Unfortunately, they couldn't save the sows that were somewhat alive yet, and it was a huge loss. It was a July day, it was very hot, and the fans had gone down in the barn. But it is a reality, and it was, unfortunately, their insurance didn't cover it either. So a tough lesson for young boys. It was an FFA project that had expanded, and it was, I know it was very difficult at the time. But just reminding everyone how dangerous it can be, and yet we know the dangers, and making sure. And I am just going to keep advocating for safety, but not sure how much I want to see OSHA come in. Voluntary is great. Voluntary is great. I'm just worried about where it's going after that, and that does concern me. So anyway, I'm trying to think if there's any other ag. You heard about the RFA program. Certainly your banks will work with you on that, and there was no more funds 2 weeks ago, and so that is a refund that's added money. So understanding that this is a challenging year and that people are going to need a little bit more help. And I would tell you, we asked them how this is on the state budget, and proud to say that this is hardly any effect to our state budget at all. They rarely have anybody not pay back the loans. It has worked very well, and is a really good program, and so it wasn't hard to talk the legislature into making sure that we provided that. It's a good way for people to get through. But I would say the other thing, knowing this as a farmer, and I expressed this down in St. Paul, 1 year does not remedy last year. That I know for a fact that it's going to take 3 to 5 years of good, fairly good crops and prices in order for us to get this all turned around. And it's important, I see a few young guys here, but it's important for our young men and women, because we've got women as a larger growing agricultural group, and we want to make sure that people understand that this is challenging. It does come and go, a tough lesson for our young people, but it is part of farming. And having grown up with it, I've watched it happen every once in a while. So I wish you all the best on farming, and hopefully we're going to have a great year this year, so that will help us. And the prices are much better. That will really help too. Anyway, I serve as the lead on Health and Human Services policy. So, and then I've also been assigned to Health and Human Services Finance. So we talk a lot about what's going on with healthcare. You have all heard about the concerns about coronavirus. Some days I think it's blown up too much because it isn't as deadly as the flu, believe it or not. But it is concerning, and it is probably going to rear its ugly head in Minnesota. They know they're watching 2 cases right now that were exposed. So they've told us that it's probably not if, but when. But I did hear somebody say on the news the other day that, well, you know how flu disappears? come spring, that's very likely what will happen with this too, is that it will disappear. It is much harder on older people than it is on younger. So it affects, they think there are people that probably got it. And unfortunately, the other thing is if you have some pre-existing conditions, then of course it is a little more damaging. So, like everyone says, make sure you wash your hands and don't put your hands in your mouth and face and all that, you know. So, and of course it's really hard for little kids because that's just little kids. So, but it is being watched at a huge level in the cities. We get reports every day. They are planning. We are talking about funding programs so that there is money there should they need to do some things. We already did that with measles. There was a huge outbreak of measles, so we put $5 million into a healthcare account. Fortunately, they only have used 500,000 of that. So there is money sitting there. They're talking about doing a little bit more. I don't know how much more they are going to request, so we'll see. That's a conversation that we've been having. And if you look at all the bills we're seeing, I will tell you that my colleagues in the House have brought a lot of bills forward that a little questioning, and the senator's not here, but I can tell you that 90% of those that are being passed in the House do not have companions in the Senate. So unless something changes, most of those are not going to go anywhere. So, and there's some interesting there's some interesting bills in the healthcare. But there are some important ones, and I'm hoping to get it heard. If you need to have non-emergency transportation, think somebody that can't get in a car from a wheelchair, someone that needs to go someplace that does not have a helper, a driver or something. We're trying to get that passed so that, like we see in our neck of the woods, R&L transport, there's some really tight funding there. Insurance has been increased quite a bit. The costs are not meeting the availability of running that business. So we're trying to get some rural funding for not just R&L, but all of the rural businesses that are doing this. So really important to help people that can't or don't have somebody to transport them to a medical appointment or whatever it is they need, and get them to where they need to go. These businesses are not reimbursed for the travel back. So the other day I was driving to the cities, and who should drive by me but R&L? And we were down by St. Cloud, and so I thought, they are driving somebody all the way to the cities because of something they need, and then they will go back and they're not reimbursed for that cost, so that becomes a little bit of a challenge. So that is something we're working on. I've got Representative Hewitt that will carry it in the House, because you get it heard much better if you make sure the majority party is carrying it. So, and he is an EMT himself, so that helps when he understands the detail. So Representative Green and I serve on state government, and that of course we could have that conversation about the Secretary of State. And unfortunately, in the last election that happened on Tuesday, the Secretary of State website, if you wanted to know where to vote, you could go on there and find out where to vote. Unfortunately, for 17 minutes, it routed you to a campaign website rather than the actual Secretary of State where you go. So we've had some conversation in committee about it. They're saying, oops, it happened. And we're saying, oops, it shouldn't have. So we're having some pretty serious conversations with Secretary of State, Steve Simon, thank you, Steve, about what happened and why it happened and how they need to make sure that there's safeguards. And unfortunately, it got redirected, and they should have caught that. They set all this up way before election, so it should have been caught. And that was a very concerning, it doesn't matter where it gets rerouted to, it should always be the Secretary of State's office so that people can get that, and, shouldn't happen. So, and of course, we talk about other things like libraries, and state government works on that. So, maybe I will just pass it on. I don't have to go right away, so I'll pass it on to Representative Grossell and let him talk a little bit, and then we'll be around for any questions you have. Okay? Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for the invitation to come here. This is the first farm forum that I've been to, and I don't really have a background in farming, but just like my military service, my law enforcement service, and my career in over-the-road trucking, you know, I know the importance of all of it, and I know the importance of farming. Yeah, you know, and I looked at the last beet season. I do some hauling in my off time for one of the farmers out by Fisher, and it was horrible. It was horrible. It was stop and go, wait till it freezes, go again, and then break through, and we got to stop again. You know, or the beach are too dirty, or something else. And so, you know, I feel for the farmer that I was working for, and it was all over the place. So I'm glad the RFA got accomplished in the House, and hopefully they'll get that knocked out in the Senate as well. And you know, any kind of disaster relief that should be coming, you know, to get it for the farmers. So again, like Senator Johnson, my prayers have been out for the farmers as well. I do a lot of the work as far as working on public safety issues. Right now, you know, I've got bills in for to try to get hearings on making it safer for our kids, and one of them in particular is increasing the penalties on child pornography. Yeah, so that is something that I'm very passionate about, and we'll be working hard to make sure that we hopefully can hold people more accountable, because right now our state law is laughable. And when a person gets charged with perpetrating on a child through child pornography, it's more than likely a presumed stay where they do little to no jail time. And you know, all of a lot of these videos that are being put out of child pornography, the human trafficking area, they're seeing some of these missing kids are being used for this, for these child pornography. It's horrible, the things that go on. It's rape, torture, all of that stuff. You know, so when people look at me and they say, well, is it that big of an issue? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. When these people are victimizing children continuously, it is a big issue, and it needs to be stopped. So any prayers and support to help me, you know, to keep that legislation moving forward. I've also got legislation on making sure that, you know, our cities cooperate with law enforcement as far as making sure that all of our federal laws and our state laws are being adhered to. And that comes into play in some of these sanctuary cities, let's say, where they don't want the police force to cooperate with federal agencies. No, that shouldn't be. You have to be able to work together. And I heard one of the concerns about that scale, the scales and such. Running those beat trucks, they can come in and check the scales as well, you know, to see who's hauling too much, you know. And you know, the farmers, and I give them credit, are pretty good at making sure that keep those weights down, keep where they're supposed to be, or keep them within reason at least anyway. So at least that's the one I was driving for did, because you know you get the fine, the driver gets the fine, the farm gets the fine, and, you know, so nobody's making any money there. So I mean, those are just a few of the things. I'm also on a veterans committee and trying to make sure that we take care of our veterans coming home from overseas, trying to make sure we take care of our veterans who are getting up in their years. We're still working on getting the federal go-ahead to put a veterans home in Bemidji and Beltrami County, so that is still something that is in the works. And you know, so we'll keep hammering on that. You know, the northern portion of Minnesota over the northwest and such is underrepresented as far as making sure our veterans don't have to travel all the way over to the veterans home in Silver Bay or one of the metro areas or further southwest. So we'll keep working on getting that knocked out as well. I guess some of the bonding issues, you know, what was brought up as far as the number for bonding is, you look at it and you go, no, that's not going to happen. It's really high in the House is what their dream is, but the Senate said 0. So somewhere in the middle we'll meet and make sure that it is a reasonable number, because that's more debt for people to have on the stage. And just because we have a higher service rating doesn't mean you take your credit card there. We're not going to take the state's credit card there, the taxpayer's credit card. I'm not going to stand for it, neither will any of the senators or representatives. So just in a nutshell, I guess those are just a few of the things that I work on or I take part in. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer, or at least try.
I got one. With the budget surplus they got, are they foreseeing any new excess money next year? I mean, is it going to continue on?
You know, if we keep policies, going the way we have them set up, you know, we'll have to wait and see. But if we've got that much right now, then it's policies aren't changing. Then it should keep having that increase or that excess. And if we have that excess, then that means we're taxing too much. So that means we should be giving it back. That means we should be working towards policies that are lowering taxes on all the working people. And also, it's just.
But the governor keeps trying to implement new taxes every time you turn around.
Well, that's why we've got to make sure. That's why we've got to make sure. If the governor's trying to implement new taxes, that's why we've got to make sure that we regain the majority in the House and maintain the majority in the Senate, so that we can keep that in check.
What do you plan to do with that $1.5 billion in excess for this year?
Well, the $1.5 billion is get it back to the taxpayers. You know, in whatever form or fashion that we can come up with, as far as, you know, either more tax breaks or, you know, just in infrastructure, making sure it goes to where it should go for things that are needed, roads, bridges, you know, things that instead of raising taxes, put it to use in the right places. No. Yeah.
I can holler. We've talked about Section 179 a bit this morning. I think Senator Johnson said it would be about the cost to fully conform about $250 million, and he said the Senate is fully on board with full conformity. He did not mention the fact that that $250 million would come somewhere else out of the budget. Where do you see your position on Section 179 and how we should get to conformity, or what sort of conformity do you see appropriate for our farmers? And it also affects large trucking firms a lot also, so it's not just a farmer thing. People forget about construction and trucking also.
Well, again, you know, he talked about the 179 conformity is to make sure that we conform to it, get back on track, and if they have all of those things out there, to make it retroactive. Get that money either forgiven or put back to where into the taxpayers' pocket so they can keep working. You know, so I mean, as far as not conforming when we should have, that's why we're in the position we are now with that. We had every opportunity when we had a DFL-led House to make sure we conformed with the changes at the Fed. They didn't do it. So there we are. There we are. So to get the conformity, get conformed with the tax changes that were made, so that it holds Minnesota taxpayers at least harmless. And that's what would have happened had we conformed from the start. So to get it back on track, that's what we're going to keep working towards. And I hope we get it to the point that they look at what was the levies that have been laid on farmers, that it's forgiven and it's gotten rid of. That's what we're going to keep working on. You know, if there's things that we can keep moving and without conforming, you know, if that's the way that, you know, so it's, I guess I'm not the one who could really dwell into it or get into the weeds too much on that, but we're going to keep hammering on it, keep working. All right, thank you. I'll pass it on to Steve Green.
Thank you. Played my cards right now. Everything has been answered, so I don't have to talk about the rest of it. But, I will say well, thank you for being here, by the way. This is a great turnout again. It's always fun to come here and try to answer questions and tell you what's going on. As far as the RFA goes, the only thing I'll add to what you already heard is that there was a movement to try to delay it. And so we did some things that probably seemed a little extreme to get this moved to the House floor. And, but the reason was, in my opinion, and in others as well, is that they were going to try to hold this up as a tool to pass a much larger bonding bill. And I'm just going to touch on bonding a little bit because I know it probably doesn't affect all of you in ways that you know right now. But the House is looking at over $3.5 billion they want to bond for. The Senate is under $2 billion, and so is the governor, and that scares the jeepers out of me. If we're going to bond, and I've voted for one bonding bill in my life, and on bonding, what they will do is they'll come and ask you what you need to vote for the bonding bill, and they'll try to promise you a project in your district. It's always angered me. So the one year they said, Steve, what do you need to vote for a bonding bill? And I said, make everything infrastructure. No more swimming pools, no more nonsense. You give me a bill that's all infrastructure and I'll vote for it. And they did, and it was big. It was like $800 million. But I did vote for that off the House, and it went to the Senate. When it came back, it was full of crap, and I didn't vote for it then. But I got to remember that in Minnesota, we passed a constitutional amendment that says we have to have a balanced budget here. We can't borrow money, but people that in the government, no matter who they are, really love to spend your money. And so what they've done now, instead of running the state into a deficit because they can't anymore, is they borrow. You know, we've raised taxes in this state terrible amount, and they're on automatic pilot. So what we spent in the last biennium is going to go up unless we make real cuts. It's just automatically going up. Well, what they've done to get around it is they go to bonding. And they say we can bond for 3-point-something% of what we bring in. And right now, our bonding is close to $12 billion. So if you look at $48 billion biannual budget, you know, you're looking at a fourth now of what we budget for, we're in debt for. And that's not what Minnesotans want. And what we bond for today, whether it's a trail, a bike trail, or something else, if it's not infrastructure, remember this. My last grandchild, 15, number 15, was born 3 weeks ago. When she's of working age, she'll be paying the bonding debt that we're doing today. All right? And that's why, if anybody asks you why Green won't vote for bonding, that's why. The reason I like the revolving loan is, out of all the money that we stick out there, this is one of the few that's ever paid back. I mean, you got a 90-some% payback rate on this stuff, and it's a good deal, and it helps a lot of people. I don't serve on the Ag Committee anymore. I got pulled off that in this last biennium, but it was okay because Deb does a really good job at holding things down and keeping everybody informed on what goes on in Ag. But I do serve on 2 environmental committees, and I think that that's super important to our farmers. And a lot of the stuff that I do there is working with farmers, and I'm not going to take up a lot of time, but I want to inform you on something that I found out a little while back and that I'm working on, and that is we're always getting hit through overburdensome agencies, and they're always coming in and they're trying to tell us X, Y, and Z, and we got to test this, you got to test your well, whether you're irrigating, you got to test your waters if you're farming next to the water. There's a process out there that the DNR has known about for probably 2 years, where they can put probes into the rivers and into your wells that cost anywhere in a regular well maybe $1,000, in an irrigation well maybe up to $10,000, but they can give you real-time information on what's going into that well. Because right now, if the DNR goes and they test a well, they'll drop down, pull a sample, pull it up, and if it's just rained, levels are going to be low. if it hasn't rained for a long time, levels are going to be high. This will give you real-time information, and it's super cheap. And we could probably get rid of half of the people out there testing your wells if we had this kind of information. So that's one of the things that I'm working on, and so we'll be looking into that. Other than that, everything else has been discussed. If you have questions on that, I'll answer it. But I will give you a heads up on something that just passed the House floor, and the Senate has told me they're not going to take it up, and I hope it's not, but that's paid family leave. And a lot of people don't know really what that is. I'm not nervous, I just get dry. Paid family leave, the way it's set up, is set up like Social Security. And what they'll do is, it doesn't matter who you are, if you hire anybody, you hire somebody for a day a year, you're going to be involved in this. And what they will do is they will take, just like a Social Security tax, they'll take 6%. 6% comes from the business owner, 3% comes from the business owner, 3% from the employee. And it's deducted automatically, and they'll collect that for a year or 18 months to put it into an account. And after that account has been set up and you paid into it for a very long time, then if your employer or your employee that you're hiring can demand that he get or she get up to 12 weeks for one medical procedure, whether it's they're having a baby or whether they have some other form of medical problem, they can get 12 weeks paid leave out of that. And then they can get 12 weeks paid leave for the other one as well. So that's 24 weeks. If they're in the military, they can get another certain amount of weeks. It'd be almost up to 30 weeks per year that people would be able to draw off this and get 90% of their wage in most cases that you'll be paying for. And also in this bill, that this is all going to be dumped onto the Department of Economic Development, DEED, and they'll have complete control over it. And after 2024, they'll be able to take the cap off of that 6%, and they'll be able to raise it whenever they want. They'll have the authority to borrow from it. And I said, the reason it made me so mad when I saw this is because it took all the way into the late 60s before the government could steal your Social Security, right? And they're putting into the bill, they can take it right now. They can take it before they collect it. Because in this, they can look forward and say, we're going to raise the rates to 15%, and then we're going to take the money now. And so just keep an eye on that. The Senate said they're not taking it up. If anything comes up in the Senate, I'm going to be putting out email updates because this would kill you and any other business in Minnesota. It would be disastrous. Looks like Deb wants to weigh in.
Yeah, I do. Actually, I found out through a radio interview on KROX yesterday. Senator Johnson was at home and I was in the radio station. And he and I have both been approached by a group that is looking at this family medical leave approach in a private business rather than the government. And I haven't seen the language, so I don't know the detail. But I said, well, bring me the bill, let's look at it. I was an absolute no about any of this. I just work it out, work your businesses out. I don't know about you guys, but we had a gentleman that worked for our farm for 30 years, wonderful man, very dedicated, says, I want to cut back. We're like, yeah, that makes sense, but I don't want to quit. I'd be more than happy to come and help you. And so he would start, and unfortunately it turned out he had cancer and got really sick. But the federal government at that point came in and said, you can't provide health care unless you provide it for everybody that's part-time. Well, we had another gentleman that said no, he didn't want it, but this guy would have liked it, and we would have liked to have kept it on him. But our accountant said no, they're not going to let you do that anymore. And so we did some other things to help him through those end days of life. But it really frustrates me when government comes in and says what you'll do as a business. That man was loyal to the farm, and we wanted to help him. We helped him and his widow eventually with whatever they needed in another way. But government stepped in and really changed what we could do for him. Anyway, back to the family and medical leave. There's this conversation, New York does it, so right away that my antenna goes up and goes, oh, I don't want to follow New York anywhere. There's an approach to do a private business where you, as a business owner, can choose to purchase this and then work with your employees on providing it for, like Representative Green said, for your employees, whether it be, you know, you've got people that you're employed that are going to have babies, or dads that would like to be home with their family for a little while, but you can set that up yourself, or help your parents, aunts and uncles, whatever. And this bill right now says not only would you get time off for family members, you could get time off for somebody that you brought in your house. So it could have been a friend or whatever. It expands it, and that's why when Representative Green said it could be 30 weeks of time off that is paid, it becomes a beast for businesses, and they are very concerned about it. So I don't know if this, turns out Senator Johnson was approached about this bill too, so we'll see where that goes. If we can offer an alternative for businesses that want it. There are some that ask for it, but I think when we look at Main Street and our businesses, our small businesses, I'm a little concerned about how that will work. And many of us can kind of work that out with our employees should that happen, or they need time off, or you kind of, I don't know, we've just worked it out so that we can get our work done and also be able to help a family member out or a neighbor or whoever. So that's what the conversation is right now about this family medical leave. So.
Okay, we beat that one down. Now, I'll answer one question from Brian on the 179 conformity. That's been pushed, and I'm getting the hook. You asked where the money might come from, and I think you're going to see it come from a number of different places. I think you're going to see some come from the tax conformity, the surplus that's left, which also we're working on getting rid of the rest of the tax on Social Security. We're looking at putting in some credits for people with child care, some credits for people with student loans. But whatever it is, it has to go back into the community. But I think you'll see some coming out of there, and you're going to be some probably coming out of the general fund, and maybe some from bonding. That's usually how it works. And remember, if they hadn't collected the stupid stuff in the first place, we wouldn't have to pay it back. But I guess I'm done here. So thank you for your time. I'll hang around for a few more minutes if you have questions, but otherwise, appreciate you giving me the time.
Thanks to all of our local lawmakers that were here this morning to kind of give us a quick little update. I'm sure you all are ready for a little bit of a break, and a friendly reminder, we've got some coffee and rolls and donuts over there on the side. House Agriculture Committee Chair Colin Peterson is here, but before we bring him up front, again, we will take a little break. And in the meantime, we're also going to draw for door prizes. Before we draw, has everyone All right, and without further ado, here's House Agriculture Committee Chair Colin Peterson.
Do I need to use the mic? I have to use it? Okay. Well, I was going to not use the mic because it said it's hard to hear, but can you hear me okay? All right. Well, thank you all for coming out. It's a much bigger turnout this year than we had last year, so that's good. We have been not quite as busy on the Ag Committee as we've been in the past because we got the Farm Bill done, and now we've been doing oversight and keeping track of what they're up to and trying to help with some of the glitches that happen and so forth. So on Wednesday, we had the Secretary in for the annual update that he does for the committee on the state of the farm economy, and he sat there for about 2.5, 3 hours and answered questions and did a good job. He had come in to see me the day before, and so we kind of went over things, and I have a good relationship with him. He and I have figured out how to work together, and we kind of talk the same language, even though he's from Georgia. We kind of have a lot of similar backgrounds, so I've gone out of my way to try to make sure that we have a good relationship with him, and also I spend a lot of time working with southern farmers and western farmers because that's what we have to do. We have to have a coalition where we all understand each other, we all work together, and we all, out of that, come up with a farm bill that we can live with. The farm bill wasn't everything I wanted, and if I'd have had my way, if I'd have been chairman, it would have been different, but I wasn't. And so my job was to help the Republicans get the bill done, which was not easy. They were in their own way most of the time, but we finally, at the end of the day, got the thing done after the election, and they were agreed to drop the food stamp stuff, which was what was holding it up. And I keep hearing this out in farm country that, well, why don't we just get the food stamps out of the farm bill? Well, I'll tell you what, if you don't ever want to have another farm bill, and if you don't want to have a farm program that works, that's the way to accomplish it. Because 90% of the people in this country have no agriculture, have no understanding of it, and what most of them care about are food stamps and school lunch and WIC and that kind of stuff. That's just how it is. And so this is what we have to do in order to be able to put a coalition together to, to get things done. And I told the chairman, Conaway, back in June, I said, there are problems in food stamps that need to be fixed. And if you will work on the problems, instead of creating new problems, I will help you. But they did not listen to me, and they went off in the other direction, and they were going to create this work requirements, which we already have. We've had work requirements since 1996. The problem is we haven't enforced them, and we've had a waiver for 75% of the country, and there's other problems, and they won't. So they wanted to take a system that was not, working because of all these waivers, and they wanted to add more work requirements. It just, anyway, at the end of the day, they dropped it, and, they accomplished something for me within my caucus in the House that I've not been able to do in my whole career in the Congress, and that is they made me a hero with liberal Democrats. So when I came in and announced that we had won on food stamps, I got a standing ovation. And I got hugged by Maxine Waters and some of these other people. But that's what you have to do. So because of that, they didn't even ask us any question about the farm programs. Once that's taken care of, then I can do the farm programs the way it needs to be done. So that's how it works. Maybe it shouldn't be that way, but that's how it is. And so anyway, we got the bill done. I would have preferred if we could put some of the money into better target prices, into higher target rates. But it costs money, and most of the money was going into the ARC, which has been pushed by the Iowa farmers, and they've got quite a bit of clout, especially in the Senate. So we could not do what I wanted to do, and that was to get rid of the ARC and just put the money into PLC so that we had like a $4 target price for corn, maybe $10 for soybeans. So we had a safety net that was realistic compared, you know, I mean, what we have is better than nothing, but it's, so when you get down to the prices of the target prices, you're in a range of not making a whole lot of money, you know. So anyway, we got the bill done. We did get the dairy stuff done. That was one bright spot. I would say that dairy now, for small dairy farmers, they have the best safety net of anybody in the Farm Bill. If you have less than 200 cows, you have now a safety net that will keep you from losing money. And that's in place for the next 5 years. You can take that to the bank and you can borrow money on it. So you've got a $9.50 above feed cost safety net for dairy, which is about $17 a hundredweight. You know, you're not going to make money, but you're not going to lose money at that rate. And for the young guys, I've been telling people, if you want a dairy farm, this is probably the best time I've seen in my time in politics. And, you know, I used to do dairy farmer stuff for in my accounting business. This is the best time to get into dairy that I've ever seen, except maybe the 70s when that price escalation was in there. Because you can take this to the bank, you can get financing. There's barns sitting empty that you know, that people retired or quit that are in good shape. You could lease a barn. You can buy cows cheaper than they've been. You can get the neighbors to grow the food for you, to grow the feed for you, and you know, you can make it work. And you can, in 5 years, build up some equity so you can, you know, get established. But we'll see what happens. So now we've got a lot of other things that have been thrown into the mix that have kind of upset the apple cart. You know, the African swine fever was probably the biggest reason that these prices, especially for soybeans, went down, because the demand for soybeans and soybean meal, you know, went down because China, we're not exactly sure, but we think about 70% of the hogs in China have died at this point, and China has 55% of the hogs in the world, just in their country, and so this is a big hit to the feed market. And then when you added on top of that these trade problems that were created, Brazil has been filling in some of this demand in China that we would have had if we wouldn't have had these tariffs on soybeans and so forth. So we've had some issues there that are holding the market back, and I don't really see that coming back anytime soon. You know, we've disrupted these markets, and we've spent a lot of time, a lot of money trying to develop these markets, and you know, it's going to take us a while to sort out of this. And the Secretary, you know, would not disagree with me on that we've probably got low prices looking at us for the next 2-3 years, according to the forecast. So where's the economist here? There he is. You agree with that? He's an ag economist. He's got a doctorate. Don't hold it against him. But anyway, so the administration's answer to this has been to take the CCC and use the authority that's in the CCC to make these market facilitation payments. And we have spent about $30 billion over the last 2 years that the Secretary took out of the CCC, and that's legal. It says in there that you can use the CCC to support production agriculture. In the past, we have used it mostly to buy surplus products off the market, like cheese and other things that we had too much of. We would use the CCC to buy it off, or maybe buy some things off the market to try to raise the prices. This is the first time it's ever been used for direct payments to producers. And of course, the first year they used it on bushels, and they got a lot of criticism because soybeans were $1.65 and corn was a penny bushel, and wheat was 16 cents or whatever. So then they changed it in 19 to convert it into an acreage situation, and they used what they thought was the impact on the different commodities to come up with these amounts. And Rob Johannesson, the economist at USDA, he spent two hours one day in my office trying to explain to me how this works. I have to tell you, I still don't understand it, but anyway, they came up with this per acre deal, and you know, I don't know, up here it's about 50 bucks, 40 some bucks an acre, right? 54? Yeah. And there's some places it's, you know, lower than that. It's in the 40s. The highest one was Hubbard County, which I still don't understand how they got the highest number of any of these counties around here. It just doesn't, that's what doesn't make any sense. But my buddies in Stearns County, which is down in the southeastern part of my district, they got it figured out how this all works. They said, you know, we've been in a coffee shop and we've been talking about this, so we understand that the secretary's from Georgia, and so if you have cotton and peanuts, you're going to get 150 bucks an acre. And if you're from Stearns County, you're going to get $41. And the reason is because, you know, he's taking care of his people, and you're a Democrat, and we voted for you, and so we're getting $41. So that's their take on how this works. But that is not how they did it. But if you look at the map, my district got the most money out of the facilitation payments of any congressional district in the country. You know, so that's helped us out a lot. I mean, without those payments, we would be in the tank big time. And we'd have people being bankrupt, we'd have loans not being made at the bank, it'd be a big mess. So I have not criticized this, you know, even though I might have done it different, but the money needed to go out there, it needed to be done. And now the question is, are they going to do a third one? The secretary said Wednesday, in his opinion, he's against it. He thinks the trade stuff's going to come around. He said that the likelihood of that is less than 10%, that there would be another payment. So I don't know, you know, who knows. But the president said he's going to make one. So who do you think is going to win? Probably the president. So we'll see what happens. There's some talk that there might be a payment in October, which would be a kind of a good time given what's going on in November, but we'll see what happens. So we're also monitoring the CRP program. We have a new CRP program that's different than it's been in the past. It's been simplified. We've tried to put some more rationale into the program, made it a lot less costly for producers to comply with it. And then the payments are actually less than they were under the old program. Under the old program, we were actually paying more for CRP in some counties than the top rental farmland was going for. So we were paying more for CRP than the top rent in that county. And that's wrong. That's not what we were meant to do with this. So CRP should be your more marginal land that we're putting aside and, you know, for conservation and so forth. So we changed the formula so that we said that you can't have more than 85% of the rental value in your county. That's the maximum they can pay in your county. And if you're in the continuous program, which is a little bit more complicated and it gets into some state share and so forth, it could be 90%. So they've been going through this process. They had the sign up. It ended on February 28th. So we've been getting calls from people, and the secretary admitted last Wednesday that the software that they had was not working completely. There were glitches in the software, and the information that people needed to be able to decide whether to take their contract or not was not available. So they have a big backlog of people that came in, and they couldn't get them all the information, and they couldn't get into the system. So they're now working through that to try to finalize. And so anybody that was in there by the 28th is still going to be considered and can still sign up if they decide they want to take it. Now, this is all voluntary. And then they're going to decide, based on what comes out of all of that, whether they're going to reopen the general sign-up. So they might do another, he told me, they might do another sign-up based on what comes out of this one and how much land was accepted and so forth. So we'll see how that goes. The second thing, the Grassland Reserve Program, which is something that we created back in the 14 bill. This is a program that's like CRP, but there's no requirement in it that you can hay it every year, you can graze it every year. Basically, all you have to do is keep it in grass. And the definition of what grass is pretty broad. It can be just pasture, whatever, pretty much anything. We have 4 million acres available in this Grassland Reserve Program. It was 2 million, and we raised it to 4. But as I go around, I was up in northern Minnesota, where they have a lot of pasture, cattle up in, Skyme and up in places like that, and nobody knew about it. I was in southwest Missouri, which is big cattle country. Nobody knew about it. I've been all around the country, and I asked people about the Grassland Reserve, and they look at me like, what are you talking about? So the secretary told me, and he told us on Wednesday, that they've done training, and they're out there promoting it, but I can't see the evidence that that's actually happening. So in any event, the sign up for the Grassland Reserve is going to start on March 16th, and it's going to run for a couple months. And basically, if you've got pasture land, you can put that in the program, and you'll get $18 an acre. And you don't have to really do anything different than what you're doing now, except they want you to have a conservation plan, which I tried to get rid of, but it's pretty much it's not a really complicated deal. So you have to have a conservation plan with NRCS, and then you can get $18 an acre for your pasture land, or you can put land, if you got some land you don't want to farm anymore, and you're willing to put it aside for $18, you can do that, or you want to make some hunting land or whatever, So that's another program that we have been working on. Not all the glitches are out of it, but I think it's a good opportunity for some people. So I don't know, I could go on and on, but we're keeping busy. We're keeping track of what they're doing over at the department. I've got mostly new members on my committee. Out of 26 Democrats, 11 of them have been there more than 2 years, and the rest of them are all new. And they just don't know much about it. So what I've been doing is I've let these folks, I'm doing everything at the subcommittee level, and I'm letting the subcommittee chairs chair the committee. And what that does, it gives them an opportunity to learn. And the members on the committee, there's not as many, so they got more time to ask questions and learn more. And I think it's working. So I'm kind of trying to take this 2 years when we don't have a farm bill and use it to hopefully train up some new folks, for the future. But it's a big problem, and I've told a number of people this, and they say, what's the biggest problem in agriculture long term? And looking at it from somebody who's doing policy. And I say the biggest problem is that we don't have any Democrats elected in farm districts. And you cannot do policy with one party. It does not work, I guarantee you. And I don't know how you change that, because in most of these farm districts, you can't elect a Democrat. And I'm about the only one left in the whole country that represents a district that, but it's a big problem. And if you just have one party at the table, and the other party doesn't have anybody that's in a district like this, it's a big problem. And somehow or another, we've got to fix this. And it's a problem in the whole Congress, because what's happened is you have 390 districts out of 435, where the contest is not between Republicans and Democrats. The contest in those districts is, and, we know it's going to be a Democrat, we know it's going to be a Republican, we just don't know who it's going to be. And so what happens is the Republicans go to the right, the Democrats go to the left, because they want to get elected. And that's how we end up in all of this division that we have going on. So we've got to get back to having these districts 50-50 so that there's some contest and people can go back and forth and we can get some people elected from each party, go work together like we used to do. But that's way above my pay grade. So anyway, thank you all for coming out. I'm happy to answer questions or take advice or whatever. Who's in charge of this deal anyways? Is that okay if I do that? All right. Yes, sir.
Hold on a second. We're going to get a microphone so we can hear this. Move as fast as my feet can carry me here.
Thank you. One of the things I've been trying to figure out is you listen to specifically the bigger farmer, you read the news, you listen to the radio, whatever, they're in trouble. They're not making enough money to break even. But by God, if their neighbor is stumbling a little bit, they'll grab up some more land. To me, I've been in this all my life and I'm not no teenager no more. It don't make any sense. The other thing is what are they going to do with this cattle ID? They've screwed around for years and spent millions of money trying to get a system in the United States to track cattle, and we still don't have nothing.
Okay, well, it's a mystery to me why this land has not gone down. And it has not. It's actually gone up. And it's, as you say, if a piece of land comes up for sale or for rent, there are people in there paying, more money than it's worth. I don't get it, but they're doing it. And I've been waiting for the year where it starts to go the other way. We're seeing a little bit of that going on, but not very much. I mean, it depends on where you're at. So they're getting their money someplace. And I don't know if the bankers are backing them up or if they have enough equity in their other land or whatever it is that allows it to happen. But they're also paying it in rent. And that's what I really don't get. When they're paying more rent than you can actually cash flow, I don't get it. But, And the other thing on the animal ID, so back when I was chairman, one of the first things that I did was to try to get a animal ID program, RFID program, set up in USDA. And every other country in the world has it. Canada, Europe, all over the place, New Zealand. And I ran into a brick wall with the Texas cattlemen. And the reason we don't have it is because of the Texas cattlemen, primarily. To some extent, Montana, or the western guys. And they are just adamantly opposed to this. They believe that the government is going to track their operations and whatever, and the black helicopters are going to swoop down because of it, and I don't know. But, so there is some talk again about having an animal ID program. There is some effort to try it one more time, but boy, I'll tell you, these guys are tough, and they don't have anything to do with it. But at some time we're going to end up with a disease, foot and mouth or something worse, and we're going to wish we had it. But yeah, right. Yeah, it's going to happen. There's no question about it. Yes.
I wanted to thank you for your work for critical access hospitals in our rural areas. That's vastly important for all, including the farmers. Thank you for running.
Well, thank you. So I told the public television yesterday this story. And I haven't. Sometimes I don't. Like when I've been campaigning, I don't do everything I should do. But I want to tell you the story of, and this is somehow how Congress works. Maybe it shouldn't work this way, but it's how it does. So in 2003, a guy named Bill Thomas, who was a Republican from Bakersfield, California, was the head of the Ways and Means Committee. And they have control over Medicare. And he wanted to create Medicare Advantage. So some of you probably are on Medicare Advantage. That's a program where you can take your Medicare and turn it over to a company like UCare or Blue Cross Blue Shield, and then they take care of your stuff, you know, and it's been very successful, very popular. Probably 40% of the people in the 7th District are on Medicare Advantage. That's different than if you have Medicare and you buy a supplement. That's one way you do it. The other way you do it is to turn your Medicare premium over to Blue Cross, and then they pay for everything as part of the deal. Anyway, at the time this happened, the Democrats hated this idea because they thought it was going to destroy Medicare. And so Thomas couldn't get any Democrat on the Ways and Means Committee to help him. So I had a relationship with him. We had worked on some stuff, and he comes to me and he says, I can't get any Democrat to help me. He said, well, you work with me on this. And he explained to me what he wanted to do. I said, well, I don't think that's a bad idea. I don't agree with my party on this. I think they're wrong. So I said, okay, I'll work with you. But what I want is I want help for my critical access hospitals. That's my price for doing this. He said, okay. So he introduced the bill, and they had $10 billion in there for critical access hospitals nationwide. At the time, the beds were 15 beds, and that was a problem, because if you got over 15, you couldn't be in the program. So we raised the beds to 25 beds, and the reimbursement was on some kind of a formula, and we changed that to 101% of the cost of the hospital. And it ended up being $38 billion nationwide in that bill, and that's what saved these hospitals. That's why we still have a hospital in Bagley, and in Kitson County, and in Ada, and in you know, all over the place, Perham, you know, because of that deal. So the bill comes to the floor. So we made a deal. Bill did as part of it. The bill gets to the floor. It's very controversial. And I had me and 2 Democrats supporting it. And they thought they had the votes. And there was one Republican, the guy Nick Smith from Michigan, who was holding out. And he wouldn't vote for it, and we were 1 vote short. So they held the vote open for 5 hours, the longest time it's ever been held in the history of the country, to try to get Nick Smith to switch his vote. So in the meantime, Nancy Pelosi chased me all over the Capitol till 5 in the morning, trying to get me to change my vote. And I said, no. I said, Bill said he did what he said he was going to do. I got what I needed for my people. I don't give a damn. I'm not changing no matter what. And we got it done, and it passed by 1 vote. You know, and that's, so time when you're in the right place at the right time, and you've been around long enough to know how things work, you can get stuff done. And that's one of the best things that I ever did in Congress. It had nothing to do with agriculture directly, but it's been a big help for my rural communities. And now we're under attack again. They're trying to cut back to 101%. They're trying to take money out of the critical access stream and give it to other people, and we're fighting them. You know, so we're continuing to try to keep that together, but these hospitals are hugely important to our small communities, just like a school or any other of the infrastructure. So thank you, Jerry.
Any more questions?
I shall move.
Okay.
Hi, Colin. I'm a teacher at this school. This is a building that's owned by the city and attached to the school where I work. My kids are 6, 4, and 2, and they go here. This is my home. This is where my people live. I want to thank you for supporting career and technical education across the country, and your work on that's really important as we retool our rural economy. And we know that when ag is doing well, schools doing well, hospital sector, there's no isolated silos in the rural economy. Everything is connected, right? We know that the farm stress that our farm families feel, we see that trickle down into our school system. And one of the things that's happening right now, schools are having to make really hard choices. What can we do to help get the federal level of special ed funding back to where it needs to be so we don't have to spend our money locally on that really necessary service and cut people like we are in Fosston?
Well, we've made progress. You know, we were down to 14% of the special ed being funded by the federal government, and we're back up to about 20. And we at one time promised it was going to be 40. So I have been one of the people that's been pushing to get this up to where it belongs. And as you said, for these small, especially out here in these small rural districts, It is a big deal because it just eats out of the rest of your budget. So I'm going to keep doing, but it's it's tough because we're running we're deficit is up to 24 trillion now. I think when President Trump took over, it was 20 trillion. So it's gone up $3-4 trillion. Part of it because of these facilitation payments. Those were made without paying for them. They were just added to the deficit, which is legal, but not smart. So that's part of the problem. We have this deficit. Everybody pays lip service to it, and sometimes it's used against us at the wrong time, whatever. But I will continue to push on that. The other thing I'm trying to do is get us back to where we should have been, or where we were 20 years ago, where we have technical training in the high school for trades, for welding, for machinists, for those kinds of things. And it's hard to do in a small school like Fosston, but there's some things you can do. Like in Hutchinson now, they've come up with this academy, and as part of their high school situation, you can leave high school and get a job equivalent to what you would have got out of vocational school just by going to the Hutchinson High School. And we got guys and gals graduating from there getting $70,000, $80,000 a year jobs right out of high school because they were trained on technical, carpentry, welding, all this kind of stuff. And that's when you need to get to these kids is when they're young, to see that there's opportunities besides just going to college. Now, I'm not against going to college, but for a period of time, we told everybody you had to go to college in order to succeed. And what do? We got all kinds of people that are in debt, and they don't have a job because they did that. And they would have been way better off to go to vocational school or, some other ways. So what I like to do is I'd like to make 2-year vocational schools free. So, and also in the high school, fund the technical stuff in the high schools. So we get these kids ready for these jobs. In my district, the biggest thing I hear is we can't find enough people to work. And the part of the reason is we're not training them for these jobs. And I mean, it's great to to take a French language major, but that's not going to get you a job in Fosston, I don't think. So I'd like to make that 2-year thing free. And I'd also like the student loans that these kids ended up getting saddled with. To some extent, it's not all their fault. It's our fault that we kind of pushed them into this, us as people and the parents and everything. There is no way that we should allow the country to charge these kids 8% interest when we're giving Wall Street 1% interest. It is outrageous, and we need to let them refinance this debt and get the interest rates down, and extend it out so they can get out of debt. You got families that can't buy a house, can't buy a car, they're stuck because they got all this debt. So we need to focus more on this whole education area and get this to where we need to get it and understand that the future of the country is in the education of the kids. I mean, that's where it's at. And we've always understood that in this district. We are the home of Koya Knudsen from right down the road. And Koya Knudsen was only there 2 terms, but she created the federal student loan program. And a lot of people don't know that. It's an amazing accomplishment that she did with only 2 terms, because she understood the value of education.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your service to all the people of the 7th District. I guess my question would be, how many years in Congress generally does it take to become chairman of a committee, and what powers does that give you?
Well, it depends on what committee it is. It took me 17 years to become chairman of the Ag Committee. And that wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have been lucky, where the 2 other people that were ahead of me ended up having some problems and getting defeated. So I would say, it depends on what the committee it is, but I mean, like on the Small Business Committee, which does not have much jurisdiction, you might be able to get chairman in 10, 12 years. Or the Ways and Means Committee, which is one of the more powerful, or Appropriation. you're probably talking 30 years, you know, before you can become chairman. So it takes a long time. And then you can't, in the old days it was seniority. So in the old days, if you were there the longest, you were the chairman. That's how it was. But that's not how it is anymore. Now you have a steering committee that's made up of 30, 40 people. And you have to go before them and tell them what you're going to do. And they can ask you questions about what you've done if you've been chairman. And then they vote whether to allow you to be chairman or not. And then that has to be approved by the entire caucus. You know, so again, this is why it's important that you work with people from the urban areas and that have different interests than we do out here in the 7th District. That's what you have to do. And I'm proud to say that some of my best friends are in the Black Caucus, the Hispanic Caucus, you know, the Women's Caucus. I work with those folks because that's what you have to do your job. And so I told the secretary, he says he was getting beat up over these payments, and he said, well, the district of the chairman's got the most money of anybody in the country. And I said, yeah, I'm just doing my job, I said. Anyway.
Any other questions?
I think they're worn out, huh?
All right, well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys, I appreciate it.
Let's give him a round of applause. All right, as we wrap up our speakers here, we want to make sure to say thank you to all of those who made today possible. Just go through our sponsors here today: Ag Country Farm Credit Services, American Federal Bank of Fosston, American State Bank, Grigla Erskine, Bagley Co-op Association, Border State Bank of Clearbrook, Clearbrook Elevator Community Co-op of Lake Park, Cornerstone Vet Service, Craig Espeseth Inc., East Polk County Farm Bureau, Fertile Repair, First National Bank, Bagley Fosston, First National Bank of McIntosh. First National Bank of McIntosh is also a video sponsor here today. Fosston Ag Repair, Irie Insurance, Ken Hovey, Pioneer Seeds, Kingtown Insurance, Lakeside Building Center, also a video sponsor. Larson Parts and Repair in Bijou, Linfors Agency in Fosston, Northern State Bank, RDK Enterprises, Select Ag, Soli Realty, and Ultima Bank here. So let's give all of our sponsors a round of applause here today as well. And one last time, all of our speakers here today, and of course, Kara Hart from Red River Farm Network.
Thank you so much for letting me be a part of this MC. I'm going to go catch House Ag Committee Chair Colin Peterson for a quick little interview. So I'll see you guys back in a second.
All right. And thank you again to Deb Keel, Steve Green, Matt Grussel, Mark Johnson, and of course, Colin Peterson here today. Let's give all of our speakers one last round of applause. All right, and we have some more